Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Happy Saturday. As George Santiago says, happy anniversary of the 2020 championship team. Shout out to Lakers Visuals, Connor Phillips, Colts, Brian, Ali, Kevin, Sarah, J Note. What up, everybody? So just got back from Lakers practice, where the Lakers had their fourth and final practice of the week, leading into tomorrow's third preseason contest against the Golden State Warriors. We got some updates on the LeBron situation, the starters, Luka, other health updates, and some of the things that the Lakers are trying to focus on going into tomorrow's matchup. So we will be touching on all of that in today's practice report. Before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. All right, let's get into it. So update, or takeaway number one, rather, is going to be in the wake of LeBron being out, we don't yet have clarity as to the new starting lineup. And JJ, of course, said that first and foremost, they want LeBron back as soon as possible. And it is a big blow to the team to not have LeBron. At the same time, he said he had been operating under the assumption that LeBron was going to miss some time entering camp. It's interesting to hear that now, almost 2 weeks into the season. And this finally coming out on a couple days ago on Thursday that LeBron was going to be out for the remainder of the preseason, opening night, and a little bit into the season, if not longer. We still don't know yet how long he's officially going to be out. JJ said that this injury is tricky and that this could be something that keeps him out potentially longer. So we got that out of the way in terms of like discussing that with JJ, but then it shifted towards like the identity with this group. And there was a couple of interesting things I took away from what he was saying. So one, he acknowledged that there is no set starting lineup now, and that he's not sure, both in the short term without LeBron, what the starting group is going to be, but also longer term, how that's going to evolve. And there might end up being two different identities in terms of the LeBron-less identity and what that starting group looks like, and then the LeBron identity once he's back and who fits next to him as that fifth guy. I asked him specifically about the Luka-Austin pairing, because if you go back to last season, and I've referenced this before on here, the Luka and Austin, there's different metrics depending on where you look and if it's factoring in like garbage time or not. But depending on where you look, Luka and Austin on the floor with LeBron off was somewhere between plus 18 points per 100 possessions to plus 20 points per 100 possessions. So monster numbers there with Luka and Austin on the floor and LeBron off. Now, it was a small sample size. And as JJ noted, which was interesting to hear him bring up a former player, he noted that Dorian Finney-Smith was a key component of those lineups, and that if you look at some of the three-man data, which I know some of you have been posting on X, DFS was a big part of the success of those Luka Austin lineups. So JJ's point was that he still is trying to figure out who the other players are going to be in terms of filling out. Of course, DeAndre Ayton's going to start, but the other two spots, who are the types of players that are going to complement Luka and Austin best? And I think of note, going back to last season, and we know JJ's a big analytics person. We know he's a big lineup data person. The Luka Vando pairing was not good last season. And in theory, given Vando's defensive abilities, that like he theoretically complements Luka, at least on the defensive side. And then as a player who is screening and cutting a lot, there should be some utility there with Luka. But that pairing was not good last season. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it was not as good as some of the other Luka plus like Rui or Luka plus Austin or some of the other two-man pairings with Luka. Vando was on the lower side, and I believe might have been one of the only negative players or close to negative players with Luka. So I think this version of Vando clearly looks better than last year's version on both sides of the ball. He's earned rave reviews in camp. He's looked pretty good in the 2 preseason games. So I think we're getting a different version of Vando right now, but hearing JJ say or discuss the lack of clarity with which other 2 players fit best next to Luka and Austin, like we will eventually have an answer just based on who he starts and what that looks like in the preseason. But it sounds like he's unclear, and there is somewhat of an open competition, whether it's in practices or whether it's in these preseason games, or really I think the answer is both, as to who is going to fit best next to Ayton, Luka, and Austin. I think that's the locked in trio as starters and for the time being as closers for this team. And then it's a matter of some form of competition, likely between Rui, Smart, Vando, and Jake LaRavia, and maybe an outside chance at Gabe. I think should be the 5th guy out of those 5, but we know JJ loves Gabe. So that was the, I think, kind of big picture takeaway for me in terms of just the lack of clarity with the starting group, and maybe JJ knows and he just doesn't want to discuss it. But for now, he's at least positioning it as sort of an open competition for who's going to earn a bigger role, who's going to earn a starting spot. And would have been, I didn't expect him to necessarily have answers to those, but obviously it would have been telling if he did. Second thing, we got some Luka updates. So Luka was a full participant in practice today for the first time this week. As I had mentioned on Thursday, he was a full participant last week. We got the clarity from JJ on that. So he partook in everything today, which was, I think, a positive development going into tomorrow's game. JJ did say, and Luka confirmed, because we also spoke to Luka, which was, we're supposed to talk to him a couple times this week, then it kept getting pushed back. So we finally talked to him today. Both Luka and JJ said he's TBD for tomorrow, but that he is going to play in 2 preseason games. So the Lakers have 4 preseason games remaining. They do have a back-to-back in Phoenix and Las Vegas next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. So I would assume that Luka plays tomorrow, and then in probably the back end of the back-to-back in Vegas. I think the Lakers will probably punt the Tuesday game in Phoenix and then prioritize the Vegas game. However, if he does not play tomorrow, that then I think shifts it to him playing likely again the Vegas game, but then likely playing the Lakers close out the preseason on Friday, next Friday at home against Sacramento. I think it's against Sacramento. And that typically is a game that they will punt and rest guys, but that might be a game that they use as a dress rehearsal and have as many guys back as possible. So that's something to monitor. But we spoke to Luka, as aforementioned, and he said, he clarified that he was a limited participant this week because of national, Eurobasket and playing for the national team. And he just said it's a long season and he's trying to make sure he's prepared and gets like a little bit of rest going into the season. So that clarified that he's not dealing with an injury and there's nothing more to make of it. I think the Lakers are just being a bit cautious with him. But it was good to hear him talk about just next man up mentality without LeBron, that similar to what JJ was saying, like it is a big loss to not have LeBron, but and he kind of dismissed the idea that he has to do more. It was more of the collective, and that's what you hear with Luka, is it's always more about the team rather than himself. So nothing else to really update on the Luka front. And then third and final thing before we get into the Q&A portion here, just a slew of injury updates. So Austin will be back tomorrow. He will play against Golden State. Marcus Smart was a full participant again today, will also play tomorrow against Golden State. So he'll be making his preseason debut. Maxi Kleber is still a modified participant. Adou Thiero is still a modified participant. And when asked about Adou, because remember there's the video that just went viral of Adou dunking and his head's at the rim, and he's a freak athlete. And JJ confirmed that he's a freak and that even in his modified state, he is one of the most athletic players in the gym. However, JJ said that there is not yet clarity as to when he will be able to resume full participation in practices, and that they're trying to be cautious with him. So it does not sound like Adou Thiero is close to playing, at least based on JJ's comments. So he's not going to play tomorrow. Neither is Maxi. And then the Maxi situation, I mean, this brings me to the whole thing with the Lakers and injury stuff, because Maxi was originally reported, like not even reported, like said by JJ that he was only going to be out for a few days. We're going on a week now of Maxi being out, and he was supposed to return this week to practice, and he's been modified. Adou was supposed to be cleared this week, and he's still out, and this is lingering. So those two guys, fortunately for the Lakers, are lower in the pecking order and weren't necessarily projected rotation players, but this does continue the theme of and then you add in the LeBron situation, and it's like the Lakers not always being forthcoming with some of the injury stuff, which ultimately we find out the information when we find it out. And even if they say someone's coming back, if they're not back, like we will know that at some point. But this is why in general, when we get some of these updates about this player is supposed to be back at this time, or this player's set to be reevaluated at this time, I'm typically a little skeptical, because this just is par for the course with LA and some of the injury updates we get, or really lack thereof. And you hear a guy's going to be back and then they're not, and this just continues to happen. So seems like in general, they're just being very cautious with these guys and trying to make sure they're not rushing anybody back. But it would be nice to see Adou in the preseason. It would be nice to see Maxi in the preseason and see how these guys fit, especially with LeBron out. Now there's an opening, I think, for one of those two guys potentially to, I mentioned, like everyone slides up in the lineup pecking order. Like the 10th spot could come down to Dalton versus a Maxi versus an Adou, and each guy brings something different to the table. It could be a matchup thing where nightly it's different. So unfortunate that those guys are not playing, and we don't yet know when or if they're going to play in the preseason, but wanted to just run through the injury updates, stuff with LeBron, stuff with Luka. Let's get into the Q&A here. So first one, well, Wilson, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Appreciate it. Second one, Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Last playoffs showed versatility is key. We need to trade for Wendell, statistically one of the most switchable fives in the league, and he is a great screener. The one thing that I continually reference with trading for Wendell specifically, or trading with Orlando at all, is I think on paper right now, Orlando is the third best team in the East, and there is going to be some competition. I think Atlanta is going to be in the mix. I think Detroit is going to be in the mix. I think Milwaukee has an outside shot at being in the mix if Giannis is just that dominant and maybe a couple of their guys overperform or exceed expectations. But realistically, like Orlando should be, assuming they can stay healthy, they should be a home court advantage team in the East. I think they're clearly behind New York and Cleveland, but they're also, to me, right there next to Atlanta. I would put them slightly above, and then also a little bit above Detroit. So if I'm Orlando, I don't see why I trade Wendell Carter. And unless you are giving up Rui, which is a big swap to make, and I don't even think the Lakers would entertain that, I don't see them just giving up Wendell Carter for like Gabe and Dalton and like a second. I don't think that makes sense for Orlando and for their ambitions this season. So I think if Orlando, like, you would probably have to blow them away with an offer, and it's probably either Rui or a first. And I think both of those, I don't think, the first is obviously an overpay, and I don't think the Lakers would do that. I also don't think they would give up Rui for Wendell. So while I think he would help, and I think it would be nice if the Lakers could find a trade. I also think he's more of a, to your point, he's more of a 5 than a 4. You could maybe play him and Ayton together in some configurations, but it also messes things up a little bit with Ayton, where Ayton, part of the sell, part of the pitch to Ayton was for him to come to LA, rehab his value, and be a starting level center who's playing 30 plus minutes a night. And I don't think you could then trade for a center who, I think they're probably similar levels overall. I actually think Ayton's a better player overall than Wendell. Like, Wendell does probably do more like role player, like detail stuff, which the Lakers need, but I don't think you can necessarily sell Ayton on coming off the bench for Wendell Carter Jr. is my point. So I think there's also like a political internal dynamic here that you have to factor in. So I am very skeptical that they could pull off a trade with Orlando that makes sense. That's not an overpay. And I don't see the Lakers even wanting to overpay for Wendell. So I'm personally skeptical that this would be a realistic move for them. Jabba the Hutt, thank you for the super chat. Is it likely the staff and not Luka that made these cautious decisions? History shows that he hates not being able to play. People thought he was being lazy, but I don't think that's the case. Certainly the staff has a part in this. And to be clear, like I don't think you should say Luka's being lazy. I know that he's gotten some flack from a segment of the fan base, and I know people are referencing Jokic and Şengün playing, and we still don't know yet if Luka just took off a few or was a modified participant in a few practices and he ends up playing tomorrow, then I think this is a lot of just much to do about nothing, right? Like I don't think it's a big deal. It is unfortunate that they've missed some live action reps, and Luka and Austin, that chemistry, Luka and Ayton, that chemistry, like that I would have maybe liked for him to have had an extra full participation in practice. Like, maybe he takes a couple off and then has a couple full ones, but they did get the full one in today. I think with him and how much, like we have seen, let's look at some of the recent examples of guys coming off the Olympics tend to be eased into training camp. We've seen it with the Lakers before. Also, like think about coming off of the bubble and just that turnaround. Obviously, this is a different situation, and there was COVID, and like there was a lot of factors with that. But it is similar in terms of the timeline of Luka was just playing basketball basically a month ago at a very, very high level, like playoff-like intensity. It is, I think, fair for him to ease in. Now, again, I think we're talking, I think one practice to me really does like shift the optics of it, where again, if he had like a couple of limited participations and then a couple of full ones this week, I think people are kind of off of his back, whereas that extra one is maybe the one that he's going to get some flack for. But I think there's a lot of factors going into this. It's Luka, it's Luka's team. He's got his own medical team that is part or, in lockstep with the Lakers, but that's a factor as well. Lakers medical staff. And like, I'm sure on some level, they just know, like with LeBron out, we got to be careful with Luka as well. Like that's probably a tertiary factor here in terms of just, you already have your second best players injured, your first player is going to have to carry a bigger load. Like I think on some level, they probably extends to Austin as well, who was held out obviously of the second game in Golden State. So I think the Lakers are just trying to be a bit cautious. I guess we'll have to see the results, and if they still get off to a really good start and the chemistry and continuity are there, then they're going to look good. If they get off to a slow start, then we can criticize the process a little bit more. I think this might be a situation where we have to see the results actually to determine how the process, like in theory, I get being cautious, especially with such a long break in between games and like having such a long week of practice, but there is some missed opportunity, to be clear, with some of the regulars here not getting scrimmage reps. So I mean, and my understanding has been like Luka has participated in everything but the scrimmaging. So he's still going through drills. He's still on the court with the teammates. It's not like he's gone or like leaving early or whatever. Like he's still there in the trenches with them. It's just the actual scrimmaging he's not been participating in until today. And obviously that's this week. Last week he was a full participant. So yeah, I mean, I get it. I think people saying lazy is that's like a far oversimplification to all of this. I think there is a thing to just like cumulative workload and easing into the season, but the Lakers' margin for error is much lower right now because LeBron is going to be out. So you got to be careful with it overall. But I do think we could question the process, but now this is a situation where I want to see what the results are. And if they survive or even thrive, then I guess the process was fine. But if they don't, then we can point back to this and be like, hey, you guys kind of wasted this week. Green Light Transport, thank you for the super chat. I feel sorry for Luka. He is caught up in this LA drama. We need a clean slate. Get rid of LBJ. Ayton is no good for long term. Get Kessler. AR is not a good match. Get Dyson Daniels. Jake is a joke. It's bad. All right. Green Light Transport is just, he's lighting the bridge on fire here with multiple players. Well, the LeBron situation, ESPN reported there's 4 different ways it could play out, and that's a whole other topic that we can get to at some point in the Q&A today. Ayton, I think, is a short-term situation. I talked about this in my mailbag on Thursday night, that I think if he exceeds expectations, he's probably getting a bag from someone next summer. If he maybe plays to his contract or below it, then he's likely opting in. So the Lakers are in an interesting spot with him where it's like you want him to do well, but him doing well actually means he probably goes elsewhere unless you're going to use some of your cap space on him. Kessler, I think, is going to be really tough for them to get unless they're flipping AR. And to your point about AR for Dyson, I don't think Atlanta entertains that as long as they have Trey. I don't think AR and Trey makes much sense together as a defensive backcourt. That's like a very problematic defensive backcourt. And then Jake, I think that's a little harsh on Jake right now, but I understand the general frustration right now. It's been a rough week for the Lakers, I think, overall. Xavier, thank you for the super chat. Daron Sharp and Haywood Highsmith, low risk, high reward. I like both players, and both guys are guys I've advocated trading for in the past. So I would be cool with LA trading for them. I'm not quite sure. Is it like Gabe in a second, Maxi in a second, something like that? Haywood, I think Daron's making around $6 million. Haywood Highsmith is making, I am looking it up here quickly. He's making about 5.5. So between those two, you get in the Gabe Kleber range. So if you could flip one of those two guys for those two and you just throw in a second, I don't know if that's enough for Brooklyn, but that is interesting. Kevin, what is a realistic backup 5 trade target? I really like Sharp or Wendell. As aforementioned, I think Wendell is too important to a good team for them to just give up on him. So again, I'm a bit skeptical of Orlando realistically playing ball and just giving up one of their, key rotation guys. Just like when you're a good team, you don't just give up a good rotation player for no reason, right? So I think, again, the Lakers would have to overpay for that. Sharp, I think, is gettable, and I think, honestly, I wish the Lakers, I've made this case before, like I think they should have pushed for him instead of Shake Milton in the DFS trade, and I've heard they did not push for Daron, and that was not really ever a conversation. So in that trade specifically. So I think that was a mistake on their part, and if they'd gotten Daron instead of Shake Milton, I think he would have fit in nicely. He would have pushed Jackson for backup 5 duties pre-AD injury, and then AD goes down. It's a competition between him and Jackson. I think Daron would have had a good shot to potentially start, and the Lakers then would have had that extra backup big to have him and Jackson, regardless of who was starting. Like, then you make the Luka trade and you still have Sharp and Jackson as your 2 centers versus Jackson and then a bunch of small ball. So I think they mishandled that situation going back to last season. I would throw in, I've cooled on him, and I've said this before, I've cooled on Nick Richards, but I do wonder if Phoenix gets off to a slow start, which I expect. Like, they looked pretty good against the Lakers, and I think they're going to be tough defensively, but I have real concerns with the offense and the shot creation, and whether we're talking about Jalen Green. Like, Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks are probably their second and third best shot creators, and I think that's a bit of a problem for a team that's trying to probably be a play-in or back-end playoff team. So I could see Phoenix eventually December, January, maybe even going to the trade deadline, realizing like we should probably flip Dylan Brooks, and could you, with them going in a different direction with Mark Williams and Kamen Malawach, could you maybe steal Nick Richards from Phoenix and you get Brooks and Richards? And again, I don't love Nick Richards, but he's probably better than Jackson. I think last year I would have said yes. I think it's closer. I still would probably lean Nick Richards, but I don't know how much of an upgrade it is. But I made the point countless times that I think the key, the 2 keys are a wing and a backup big, and maybe you could strike gold with both, or swing, get at least both in a trade. Like, that's probably the ideal outcome, is trading for a wing and then finding a way to steal a backup center in that deal, whether it's from that team or a 3-team trade. So that would be maybe my preferred route would be like a Dylan Brooks and a Nick Richards, like, together. See, we got some super chats. Thank you, guys. Ollie, thank you for the super chat. LeBron being out would be a concern if we still had AD, but we have Luka. Luka is top 3 in the world, makes teammates better. I'm not worried at all. So I think the Lakers, I'm generally not maybe as worried as some as well. So I agree with you. I think the part that you are maybe overlooking a little bit here is offensively. I think the Lakers, they scored like the offensive rating. I referenced the numbers earlier with Luka and Austin. With Luka and Austin on, no LeBron, they had a 125 offensive rating, which is incredible. That is dominant. That is like league best mark. If you have a 125 offensive rating with a lineup, that is a really, really good offensive rating. They also had a 105 defensive rating, which is elite and impressive. And so they actually like they scored at a league best level and defended at a league best level with Luka and Austin on and LeBron off. I'm skeptical of the defense. I think that's more of a small sample size kind of wonkiness. I think the offense will translate though. So with Luka and Austin, and this is a point I actually wish I made earlier, I'd forgotten. Like JJ said, he actually thinks not having LeBron on the floor like allows Austin to do a little bit more and like show off more of his game. And he thinks Austin's actually better in those situations. So that was kind of a silver lining he was hinting at. So I actually think between like Luka's going to be Luka. To your point, he's a top 3 player in the world. He's maybe even better than that offensively. Like I think he's a better offensive player overall than Shea and Giannis. If you want to put Shea and Giannis above him, I think you're making the defensive argument rather than the offensive argument. I think it's really between him and Jokic for like best offensive player in the world. So he's going to make his teammates better. He can carry a load. We've seen him do it in Dallas. We've seen him do it in LA. The 2 areas I am a bit concerned with, actually 3, I'll say, with LeBron's absence are LeBron is going to play, let's say 32 to 34 minutes a night. So now you are spreading that 32 to 34 minutes a night to just lesser players. Like maybe Luka plays a little bit more, maybe Austin plays a little bit more, but we're probably talking about like 1 to 2, maybe 3 minutes tops. So let's even say in the most optimistic, generous projection here, Luka and Austin are both playing 3 minutes more per game. That's like 6 minutes more combined, right? You still have another 25 to 28, 29 minutes per game that are going to a Rui, a Vando, a Jake LaRavia, a Marcus Smart, a Gabe. Maybe they're doing some more 2 big lineups. Like all those players are just a lot worse than LeBron. Like that's just objectively worse players. And those players do some things better than LeBron, right? Like Rui is a very good catch and shoot, like off ball cutter. Although I would argue that LeBron's actual catch and shoot numbers are pretty similar to Rui's. He's a really good cutter when he plays off the ball. Vando and Smart are probably, not probably, they are better defenders. So like there are some advantages you get, but in the totality of like production, numbers, just value on off, all that stuff, those guys are just worse than LeBron. So you are playing worse players more minutes. I also think there's a bit of a hit to the defense. LeBron was really important to the defense last year, post Miami game after he had the talk with JJ. He really carried the defense in stretches in January and February when AD went out, before the Luka trade, after the Luka trade. LeBron was instrumental defensively. And then the third and final thing would be the rebounding. LeBron is maybe the best rebounder on the team. It's probably between him and Ayton. Luka's also in that conversation. Vando's also in that conversation. But they don't have a lot of plus rebounders. Like Jackson is a below average rebounder for his position. Maxi's a below average rebounder. Rui's a below average rebounder. Austin's a good rebounder for a guard, but there's still a limitation there. So it's like you are now really relying on Ayton, Vando, and Luka to rebound for you. And that puts more, and you also need more from Luka and Ayton offensively. So it's like, I do think there's a cumulative impact here where I think Luka can make up not having LeBron, and Austin could help, and Ayton could help, and Rui can help. And they have the weapons offensively, I think, in the collective shot creation, passing, ball handling. They can get by without LeBron, but I think there's a depth concern for sure with this team. And then there's also some defense and rebounding stuff that I just don't think they're going to necessarily replicate with having LeBron out. So I think there's a real impact actually more with the defense and rebounding. But yeah, I think Luka can step in and do a lot of the offensive stuff for sure. UC, thank you for the super chat. Big swaps for Haywood Highsmith and Grimes at the deadline. That is Haywood Highsmith, right? Unless I'm, but well, they're not on the same team, so we're talking about 3-team trade here. Unless again, there's an HH I'm not thinking of because obviously Grimes is in Philly. But yeah, I mean, if there's a way to swing a Grimes trade, I'm definitely open to it, especially if it doesn't include Austin or a first. BT Kingsley, thank you for the super chat. What folks are missing is in the NBA is in transition. The players who have led the league are getting older. New talent is taking over. AR 25 and 5 is not easy to find. Look, you're not going to get an argument out of me about AR and his value. And I think people he's far from perfect. And again, I've talked about it before. I think the catch and shooting, especially in the playoffs, it has dipped the last couple of postseasons. And that is something to monitor for the full regular season and the postseason again. And we know defensively, I think particularly against bigger players, when you could get him switched onto a big or a big wing, it can be problematic. And he could be, guys can go through his chest, guys can get offensive rebounds, guys could post him up, whatever. I think against guards, he's largely fine. And a lot of the matchup data is positive. And I've referenced this before. He had the best matchup data against Anthony Edwards. So despite and hit some big shots on him, but overall through the totality of the series, he actually defended him statistically the best, which goes against the narrative of how bad AR's defense was in that series. Like there is a physical limitation to him, to be clear, but it's also there's a reason why he was one of the 12 players to average the stat line he averaged last season. And 2 of the other guys were also on the Lakers team. So like he was in rare air last season. And of course, some of that was like Luka missed time, LeBron missed time, AD missed time. His numbers are higher. I think his numbers without LeBron last year were like 27 and 8, which is really elite. So some of that obviously inflated some of his numbers, but like I think there's this, a term in football is a jag, right? Like just another guy. I feel like people act like Austin's just another guy offensively or overall when it's like there are just very few players, I think, that at the backcourt spot that can do what he can do. And really all the guys who can do it are like all-star, all-NBA level guys. And I don't think he's at that level, but I also think he's much better than just like a replacement level guard, the way that some people talk about him. Jabba the Hutt, thank you for the super chat. When Luka has to do the 20-plus game carry jobs, he's automatic, but it is taxing on him. So that's one of the main reasons I don't mind easing him in a bit. Exactly. And this is what I was talking about earlier with Luka, that with the context that LeBron is going to be missing 3 to 4 weeks and that going into the regular season, you want to be careful not to overtax Luka because he is going to have an incredibly high workload in these regular season games to start the season. So you got to be careful easing him in. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Watch some Wendell tape. He is a very switchable defensively, good rim protector, very good pick and roll player, has stretch potential. Orlando has 4 centers. You don't have to sell me on Wendell Carter. I like Wendell Carter. I will pull up the Orlando roster right now just to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Obviously, they have Goga. I think they're actually going to have to play small at times to close some games in terms of. So we're talking here. They got Goga, they got Wendell, they got Colin Castleton, Orlando Robinson, Mo Wagner, though Mo, remember, is coming off of a major knee injury. So that's something you got to factor in. I don't think he's quite ready to go. You got to be careful with that this season. You got Paolo, who can slide up and play some 5, Jonathan Isaac. I would still argue that Wendell's their best center. And I think, the equivalent to me would be like an opposing fan base being like, we should trade for DeAndre Ayton. And while some Laker fans, clearly based on some of the comments I see, would be okay with the Lakers trading DeAndre Ayton, and so you can make the case. Well, they got Jackson, they got Maxi. Last year they played small. You could play LeBron at the 5. You could play Vando at the 5. You could play Rui at the 5. They have options. It's still kind of like, I don't think the Lakers are just going to trade DeAndre Ayton because they don't really have a way to properly replace him. For what you're saying about even Wendell, like Goga is not as switchable defensively as Wendell is. I think he's actually a better rim protector than Wendell, but I think Wendell is a more skilled offensive player. Goga's a good finisher. Wendell, I think, has more of a jumper than Goga. So it's like you're describing a pretty good player and a player who has some scalability into a playoff context. And I just don't see why Orlando, a team that should be in the mix for 50 wins, is going to trade their starting center because unless something has changed that I'm not aware of, I believe he's going to be their starting center entering the season. So yeah, I think he's too important to Orlando. Eeg, thank you for the super chat. Which bottom feeder West team last year do you think has the best chance of making the playoffs? Which playoff team last year do you think has the best chance of missing the playoffs? I like this one. I think off the top of my head, going back to last year, it would easily be San Antonio. So San Antonio, 34-48. I think that was largely because Wemby had to sit out down the stretch of the season. They were 5 games out of the 10 seed. I think if Wemby's healthy to close the year and isn't shut down early, they are really pushing Dallas for one of the play-in spots. So I think among the bottom 5, I think far and away, like especially compared to Phoenix, Portland, New Orleans, Utah, San Antonio is by far the team most likely to make the playoffs. You could throw in Dallas as well, though they were technically in the play-in 10 seed. In terms of dropping out, I think the low-hanging fruit here is Memphis. I think there's a real chance they just miss the play-in altogether. I think the top 7 in the West are likely to be playoff teams again. I think OKC, Houston, Lakers, Nuggets, Clippers, Wolves, Warriors. I would bet if those teams are healthy, I think all 7 make the playoffs again. And then I think it's between Dallas and San Antonio for the final seed. Might just come down to, is Kyrie healthy or what happens with Kyrie? But I think those are the top 9 teams in the West. I would put Memphis at, I guess, 10. And then you got Sacramento, Phoenix, and Portland kind of battling for maybe the play-in bubble. But I think I'm most bullish on San Antonio and Dallas ascending into the playoff mix and Memphis falling out as the 8th seed. I think Dallas and San Antonio are just straight up better than Memphis. Xavier, thank you for the super chat. Does Rob resume of letting go modern day? Does Rob's resume of letting go of modern day valuable 2-way players go worry you? Letting these guys go for short-term one-way players is killing the team. Yes, this is the thing with the roster that has bothered me the most over the last few years, has been the disintegration of the 2-way talent. And when I started covering the Lakers, they had KCP, Alex Caruso, and Kyle Kuzma, and even Wesley Matthews, who like was an overall disappointment, but did have some big shoot. Like the shot, I think, was the biggest thing. I thought defensively he was largely fine as like a point of attack against bench lineups, and then even a wing guy against bench lineups. Like in a bench role, in a smaller role, I thought he did his job. The shooting was, he really struggled as a shooter, and then that's just what happens with the Lakers. You come to LA and you struggle as a shooter, then you go somewhere else and you become a good shooter again. We've seen it with Malik Beasley and different guys, like it just for whatever reason. Taurean Prince, though he did have a solid shooting year as a Laker. But I agree with you, though. I think they have really struggled to identify 2-way talent. I think they have a bunch of one-way players. They've had a bunch of one-way players for years, and particularly on the perimeters where like there's been, I think, an over-indexing on skill and shot creation, and for years trying to take the burden off of LeBron and AD offensively. And I think they over-indexed on those like combo guard shot creator types that seems to be a type for them, but is not really a type that scales well into a playoff context. Like if you actually look at, like if we go through even the conference finalists of Minnesota, OKC, Indiana, and New York, that like 6'2" to 6'4" combo guard who's like more of a scorer than a defender, there might have been like 1 or 2 total players like that in the primary rotations across those 4 teams. Like that type of player does not scale into a playoff setting. So I think they've kind of prioritized the wrong types of players. Even the drafting of like a JHS, I think, was a big mistake. Even in terms of like at the time you had LeBron, Austin, D'Lo, and Gabe Vincent. It was like JHS was never realistically going to jump over one of those guys and take a role. So it was like, it just kind of didn't even make sense at the time. And then, of course, it aged poorly and he's out of the league right now. So yeah, this is a real concern. This is probably the biggest concern. I think it's the biggest blind spot with their talent evaluation is like they do not identify or prioritize the right two-way guys. That's been a big issue. Kami, thank you for the super chat. If LeBron demands a trade or buyout, he can say bye-bye to any goodwill from Laker fans after retirement or future business. This is a big one, and I really like that you made this comment. Like I think on some level, if this is the way it's trending, and it seems like it might be trending this way a little bit, I think this is a big factor for LeBron in the optics really matter right now. And I think if he does ask for a buyout or a trade, it is going to burn that bridge for some Laker fans. I'm sure there will be some fans who will always appreciate the 2020 title. But you factor in like the backdrop of the history of him and the Lakers and Kobe. And like, I think for some fans, that was just a non-starter of ever fully embracing LeBron. And I think that's a smaller fan base than or a smaller segment of the fan base than often is portrayed. I think people act like a bunch of Laker fans just don't like LeBron, and I don't think that's true. I think most Laker fans maybe don't like love him, but at least embrace him, at least welcome him as a Laker. And he did deliver a title. I think he's been here now the longest of any stretch he's been at any place in his career. So I think he's a Laker. Like he has a big segment of his career that's as a Laker. But this is like the delicate situation that we're in right now, where if he does ask out, I think there will be a segment of fans that just turn on him permanently. And maybe with time that there'll be a healing process and he's going to get his jersey retired. He will be a part of Lakers lore and a Lakers legend, not in the, of course, Kobe, Magic, West, and not, I don't think, on the Kareem, Shaq, next tier, whoever else you want to throw in there, Elgin and several other guys. I'm not going to go through the full list, but like he is in that like somewhat of an inner circle. Again, probably more on the back end. And like it's interesting, like comparing him to a guy like Wilt, who won a title as a Laker, but LeBron's going to be basically a Laker for almost double the time of Wilt, depending on how this plays out. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a real factor here of just how this ends will determine ultimately how he's perceived by fans. And I think that is something that he's got to be careful with. And I think he's trying to be careful with. Eeg, last one, thoughts on the Kings. Yikes. What in the world is going on over there? My goodness. What is the direction, if any? And now linked to Russ, LMAO. Thank you for the super chat. Yes, I don't know what's going on in Sacramento. I think I said that at one point earlier in a live this summer, or maybe an episode with someone. I do not know what's going on. Like they had, honestly, in some ways, it's far worse than the Lakers like post-title situation, but it's sort of similar in a way of like the Lakers won the title and then they had the 1 year of title defense and then they dismantled that roster because of the Russ situation. And then they were kind of stuck making up for that for like 2 or 3 years. And with Sacramento, they have the one good year where they make the playoffs. They lose in 7 to Golden State in the first round. But it was like they had Fox, they had Sabonis, they had some momentum, they had the beam, like they had a little good thing going. And then they just have failed to build off of that and been directionless. And now we're in a situation where it's like, I like the individual pieces and I like the collective talent to a degree, but if your 3 best players are Sabonis, DeRozan, and Zach LaVine, you are guaranteeing a really bad defense, bottom 10, bottom 5 defense. And you're just not going to win anything. You're at best going to be a play-in team and you're not going to be a playoff team. So I think they need to tear it down, rebuild, trade everybody, maybe keep some of everyone wants Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray, but those are 2 guys I try to keep as like building blocks or not building blocks, but like, key parts of the next team as starting or high level bench guys. And I would try to flip Sabonis, LaVine, DeRozan, get as many picks and young players and move forward. Cause this situation is going nowhere. It's not. So, Sarah, give us something good to feel good about, Jovan. Give us something to feel good about, Jovan. Excuse me. Thank you for the super chat. I will give you plenty to feel good about. I think I'm really excited for tomorrow's game. This is going to be close to the full squad. Again, we don't yet know if Luka's playing. I would lean more toward him playing. It just logically makes more sense for him to play tomorrow, play in the second end of the back-to-back, and then rest the Tuesday, Friday games. So I think we will see Luka tomorrow, and having Luka, having Austin, having Marcus, this is going to be close to a preview of what this is going to look like without LeBron going into the regular season and like that first few weeks of the regular season. So I'm excited for that. And first home game, first crypto.com game of the season. The Lakers have talked about like transition defense and stamina, and they have the team bonding event this week. So we'll see what type of progress they make coming off of 4 practices and 4 opportunities to learn from the 2 preseason games. So I think tomorrow there's a lot to be excited about, to be anticipating. And now if tomorrow's game doesn't go well, might have a little bit of a different tune in terms of, okay, you had all this time to prepare. You're playing the same team again. You have your full squad for like the current version. Like, you know, that might be, so I don't want to be a wet blanket here, but I think there's a lot to be, I want to see like what Luka looks like with this group. Luka 8 and pick and roll, Luka Austin 2-man game. Who starts? Is it, I think it's going to be Rui and Vando, but is it Rui and Smart, Smart and Vando? Like there's a bunch of different combinations you can go with. So I think we're going to learn a lot in tomorrow's game, and I think that's exciting. So I know it's been a rough week, and I get it, but I think things are still going to trend in a positive direction for this group. Appetizers and Sushi, thank you for the super chat. Without Braun, Luka will truly have to carry a team. The last 2 seasons, Luka had the best of everything and didn't close in Dallas. Let's see if Rob makes proper trade and not sit on his hand like with Braun and AD. Yeah, I think the interesting part with this is like how long the LeBron injury lingers, right? Because if he's back by mid to late November, you probably survive that stretch and it's okay. If this goes into December, I start to be a little bit concerned with just the ask and the lift on Luka and Austin and just the collective that, I think it starts to just, it starts to weigh and there is like a cumulative workload effect here where we don't think about it this way necessarily, but like carrying a heavier workload in November and December can have ripple effects over the course of the regular season. Like the season is a war of attrition, and there's a reason why guys like to say that you might start the season at 100%. The second the first game starts, you are never at 100% again, just because of the schedule and the workload, and like you just don't get time to rest unless you have a real injury that just forces you to rest. So there's an element here of like, Luka's with a normal season could be like 90% at the end of the year. And maybe because he has to do far more, he's at 85% or 80%. And it doesn't sound like much, but like you want Luka obviously being as close to 100% as possible. So it's going to be tough to navigate, but I think we can't quite get there yet until we know or have a better sense of like when LeBron is returning, or if he returns at all, right? Like, I guess with some of the uncertainty with some of this stuff, like we don't know. But I agree that I said it in my mailbag. I think the Lakers need to make a trade. I think they need to trade for a 2-way wing. If LeBron is out or getting traded, that's a whole other conversation about like what they need to replace him, because that's going to be tough. But I agree with, in theory, that like they got to be careful with how much they put on Luka, and they need to make a trade at some point. All right. Hopping back into the chat. Going to go about 10, 15 more minutes. Adi says, hey, Jovan, just dropping by to say hello. Heading to sleep. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your rest. Omaris says, you can't replace LeBron unless you get another 1B superstar. Yeah, like I don't see a trade, even if, let's just say it's Cleveland for argument's sake. If you got Darius Garland, and even if you got Darius Garland and Jared Allen, or some combination of Garland and Hunter, or Allen and Hunter, you're not, those guys are just not as good as LeBron. And now your second best player is either Austin or Allen or Garland, depending on how you want to rank those guys. And it's like that's a drop off. It just is. And now, especially if it's a Garland, now you have this whole thing you got to figure out between Luka, Austin, and Garland of like, Can those three guys even play together defensively? There's only one basketball, so you do probably have to stagger in. Are you moving Austin to the bench in that point? And like, how is that affecting his potential future with the team? And like, there's a lot of moving parts with that's just one example, of course. But like, I agree. It's going to be hard to replace LeBron, at least in a trade, like, this season, like for like. You're almost certainly taking a step back from a talent perspective. Thomas, do you think there's a chance New Orleans and Memphis listen to offers for Trey Murphy / Herb Jones / KCP, assuming those two are playing teams at best? Yes, I do. I do think there's a chance. I've mentioned I've said Phoenix and New Orleans are the two teams I would keep an eye on because I think those two teams are the most likely to underachieve relative to their own expectations. Memphis is certainly a factor. I think they're a little bit different Memphis is a contender for this, but I think they're a little bit different because they have a little bit more proof of concept that like New Orleans has just not had success with this group and been injured for years. So like it's harder to sell yourself on New Orleans. And then Phoenix, who I mentioned before, they've had their own ups and downs and more so downs recently. And they're kind of in this transition phase where it feels like a piece like Brooks is more temporary. So those two I can see clearly being trade candidate teams. With Memphis, like I think they could be good enough to still be in the play-in mix and be like the 9 or 10 seed. And I think that they're still holding on to, remember it was only a few years ago where we were talking about them, not to the level of OKC, but they were like the team of the future in the West, right? And it was Ja and Triple J and Bane, and they were young and exciting, and they had this nasty persona, and they were trash talk teams and get into it with LeBron and the Lakers and like the Warriors, and they were this team on the rise, and that quickly fell off. So I feel like for them, they might be in denial a little bit longer that they have a shot with Ja and Triple J, but we've also seen their seasons go off the rails with injuries. So if that continues for whatever reason, maybe KCP becomes available, but I would be open to trading for any of these three guys. With Murphy and Herb, it's probably going to cost you Austin, and if it doesn't cost you Austin, it's certainly going to cost you the first. I would 100% be open to trading the first for either one of those guys. Austin's a different conversation, and for the Lakers, I'm not quite sure how they would view that, but I think I would trade like if you're doing like Rui plus a first for Trey Murphy or Herb Jones, I do that in a heartbeat. Gustavo, trade James to Utah Jazz for Markkanen and Kessler. So I'm glad you made this point because the one thing we have to always remember with any LeBron situation, talking about trades, is he has a no trade clause. So LeBron is in control. And I will break the news now. LeBron James is not going to sign off on a trade to the Utah Jazz. I think I could fairly rule them out as a LeBron suitor. So unfortunately, while that would be great for the Lakers in terms of setting them up for the next iteration and having Markkanen as the number 2 next to Luka and having Kessler as the center of the future, LeBron not going to accept that. Smokey says, please can we not do a Knicks and blow our load early with these trades? There's a reason why Rob wants flexibility and assets. It's a good point. Now, I think the interesting thing was the Lakers were positioning themselves as a future cap space team and a future offseason team earlier in the offseason. And then there's a shift later in the offseason after Eurobasket where it came out that now they're open to trading, open to taking on longer term money. So I wonder if they got, at the time, there was some optimism that they could potentially be in play for Giannis or Jokic. And Jokic obviously had the contract extension that he declined, though he has now since come out and said like that was purely a business decision and he wants to be a Nugget for life. Giannis has left the door cracked open, but we've since had the reporting that Giannis's preferred destination was the Knicks, not the Lakers, and that it was really one team he was considering, and that was specifically the Knicks. So I wonder if the Lakers' recent shift toward being more of a kind of short-term or like win now mode is maybe in part due to Luka's success at Eurobasket, but I think more so maybe gaining some intel that some of the big fish that they were hoping to catch are not going to be available or as available as they thought. So I understand your sentiment for sure. And I think the Lakers got to be careful with how they position themselves for the future, because it's tough to find a Knicks Giannis trade. So if that for whatever reason just can't happen and Milwaukee refuses to play ball with New York because they don't want to trade him in conference, they don't like what New York's offering, then the Lakers can swoop in and potentially offer a competitive package. They will have 3 draft picks as of next summer. So could you do something with Austin and 3 picks and Dalton and Rui, maybe Rui sign and trade or something? Could you get in the mix for Giannis with that package? Maybe. I think there are teams that could outbid them for sure, especially with draft capital, but it just depends what Milwaukee wants and how they view things. So I get you got to be careful with the cap space, but it does seem like the Lakers are a little bit more open to a short-term move. Kami, thank you for the super chat. Lineup of Luka, Kessler, Markkanen, Austin, LaRavia. It's the whiteout lineup. The great whites. Oh, man. Connor Phillips, thank you for the super chat. An LBJ trade is for the future, not this season. Having Allen and Hunter isn't better than LeBron this year, but it is better than losing LeBron for nothing next year. Yeah, I agree. I was responding in direct relation to the question that was being posed of they need a 1B superstar to replace LeBron for this year. Like I'm more so saying I just don't see a realistic trade where they net out that guy. Like looking at Cleveland, again, even if it's a Garland or an Allen, that's a step down. I don't even know if those guys could be a 1B on a title team. I would say no. With Golden State, it's interesting depending on like, would they flip Jimmy for LeBron, or is that a Draymond, or is that a Kuminga plus something? Like I don't know what that is, but still, even so, that's probably not the 1B. Like I guess Jimmy could be the 1B, though he is getting up there in age. Dallas, it seems like it would be more role players, so they're not giving up AD, they're not giving up Kyrie, you're not getting that star. And then the other team that's been in the mix has been the Knicks, but I don't think LeBron wants to play there. That's just speculation, please don't quote me on that. And as we're seeing with Giannis, like they would of course rather have Giannis than LeBron right now, but it's tough for them to find a Giannis trade. So more so, like I was looking through it through the perspective of finding a replacement for this season. I just don't think you're going to find that guy, but longer term, if LeBron is going to leave, it is better to trade him than let him walk next summer or to buy him out. Letting him walk, you just don't replace the asset. And I guess you do have cap space, which you can use. So I guess it depends on your confidence to use that cap space. But buying him out, I think, is the worst one, because your team just gets much worse this year. You're not going to have the flexibility to replace him. And you will have the cap flexibility next season, but having the LeBron contract on the books to whatever degree it would be on the books, I think that's a big L for LA for this season. Ken Carter, how much do you think JJ values two-way play and defense? Is he more of a I'll prove you wrong guy, where he values offense more, given how he handled Rui starting over DFS, starting at the 3? I think JJ values shooting and spacing the most, and this has been where I think there's been maybe a little bit too much optimism with the potential Vando role that I've just been stating. Like, I think Vando, for as much of a beast and a dog and whatever term you want to use for Vando, menace defensively, the lack of the shot and the offensive limitations, I think, are kind of deal breakers for JJ in terms of, I just don't see Vando, even if he ends up starting, being like this 30-minute a night guy. I think there will always be a limitation to how much JJ is willing to play a non-shooter. And it's where Rui and Jake LaRavia, despite being both, notably worse defensively than Vando, are always going to have a leg up on him as offensive threats, as shooters, as guys who could play off the ball. So unless Vando makes dramatic improvements with his shot, which up to this point, we've seen a little bit of that in practice, but we have not seen it translate to games. I think there is a bit of a limitation where, like, real he's more of a 5 offensively. And it's just, if you are Defensively, he's the queen on the chessboard. He could guard basically 1 through 4, 1 through 5. Offensively, he functions as a 5, and the Lakers already have a high usage 5 in DeAndre Ayton. It's tough to play two guys who can't space the floor out to the 3-point line together. So that's where I see the biggest hurdle for Vando in the rotation. Now, if Marcus Smart is banged up or limited for the rest of training camp, or LaRavia just isn't at a certain level defensively, I could see Vando assuming that starting role and playing a certain amount of time. But I do think there's some reluctance on the coaching staff's part because they very much value spacing, especially around Luka and Austin in pick and rolls and 2-man actions and 3-man actions. And the fact of the matter is, Vando is just not even a neutral spacer. He's a negative. He's one of the most negative perimeter spacers in the league. So that's a big hurdle to have to navigate. And I do think between the two, JJ will default more to offense than defense, as we saw with the whole Rui DFS situation. But I with all that said, I still think I'm still projecting Vando to start because I think there's some questions with Smart and his workload and his availability. And I don't think a Rui LaRavia combo is good enough to start together. But I more so view Vando as like a 22 to 24 minute a night starter. Maybe he creeps up to like 25, 26, but I feel like that's the max. I do not see him playing more than that. Whereas Rui, I think he's going to be in the low to mid 30s or in that range. And then LaRavia, I think, will potentially be in a similar range to Vando despite coming off the bench. So I just think there's a limitation for the offense. And I know a lot of fans disagree with that, but that's how I view the coaching staff viewing it. Broke with no money. Did you watch the Mind the Game pod with Drew and Vando? I have not yet watched it. It's still on my to watch list, but this is the second time you've asked me about it, and I appreciate the super chat, and I will watch it and get back to you on that. I will watch it at some point over the next 24 hours. G, what should I expect of LaRavia this year? I think this is going to be his biggest role on any team up to this point in his career. He's kind of been more of like a 16 to 20 minute a night guy. I think he'll creep up a little bit higher than that. And it's also the highest exposure role he's ever been in because in Memphis, he was not really a rotation guy when they were at full strength. In Sacramento, he was, but Sacramento just wasn't a good situation and they were a play-in team. I think this is like his highest expectations, highest exposure. First time he's making, like he got signed to a real contract, of course, rookie scale contract, but like first real contract of like you earn this with your play and your potential, and like you weren't drafted into this contract. He has certain expectations, and so in terms of what you should expect, I would expect him to be a high 30s to low 40s 3-point shooter. Not quite sure on the volume, but I expect probably 3 to 4 attempts per game. I expect a multi-positional defender who holds up well in bench lineups. I think there are some questions about him scaling up into a potential starting role or closing role, but I think he'll be a really solid 7th or 8th guy for this team. And I do think he's one of the few guys on this roster that can contribute positively on both ends. By no means am I saying he's a stopper. I think we've already seen some of the limitations in the preseason, but behind Smart and Vando, I think he has a chance to be the third most impactful perimeter guy defensively. I think it's between him and Gabe. And just based on his size and versatility, I think he could play a pretty important role. So I see him being a big part in small ball groups. I see he's also a secondary ball handler playmaker that can do some things. I don't think you want him running the offense, but could he bring the ball up and set up an action for Luka or Austin off the ball? I think so. He could pass, he can connect. The comparison I've made is like sort of a better Luke Walton. And I am doing the same race comparison here, which is always funny, but I see a more athletic, more physical, like better shooting Luke Walton, if for those who remember Luke Walton back in the day. But just this like jack of all trades is skilled in like a multitude of ways where he can pass, dribble, shoot, smart player. I think is decent rebounder, not like a good rebounder, decent rebounder, like kind of around average, and then can defend multiple positions. So that's my take on Jake. Like for $6 million, I think it's a fair value contract. David Parks, looking at this team, I think it's wise to explore trades for Connect and Kleber, and if it requires giving up Rui to get a star level 3-and-D wing, I think you do it. No qualms from me here. I think you start with Dalton, Gabe, and Maxi. I think three, like, to me, probably if I'm JJ and I'm building out the rotation, I think Gabe's the 9th man. I think Dalton's the 11th man, and I think Kleber's the 12th man. Or those are probably interchangeable. But you have the top 8. You have Gabe at 9. You have Jackson at 10. Then we could debate Kleber versus Dalton at 11, 12. If you can flip your 9, 11, and 12 into a player that's either starting level or like high level bench, and maybe that player's like the 6th best player on the team, and that moves guys 7, 8 down to 8, 9 or whatever, I think that is a very attractive trade. Of course, if you could somehow flip those guys into a Wiggins, if you could somehow flip those guys into a Brooks, if it requires maybe a Rui to get a Herb or to get a Trey, all those trades are great, and I think you do those in a heartbeat. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, ideally, you keep Rui and just move him to a bench role, but there are certain calibers of player that I would give up Rui for. I would give him up personally for Wiggins and Brooks. Now, I'm careful at what draft capital you're adding in there, and I would not give up a first with him for either one of those guys. But if ideally you find a trade that does not give up Rui, but if it ultimately comes down to matching salary and Rui being the most attractive player piece in the trade, if you could upgrade him, I think you have to do it. Omaris Hall is trying to give me an aneurysm or a heart attack. How about a Westbrook reunion? No. Kaus or I don't know how to say this. No, God, no. He's doing the Michael Scott here. Oh, man. Rami, what up, Rami? Says buyout isn't an option. Apron teams aren't allowed to side players who made more than the MLE before the buyout. So you're saying buyout isn't an option for LeBron to be bought out and then go to an apron team, but it's still an option for him to technically be bought out. It just would affect which teams he could sign with, if I'm understanding you correctly here. But that's a good point. Rami is on top of all the cap stuff, so appreciate you for you're the CBA guy here. John says, as a Russ and Lakers fan, I hope he gets signed soon. Sucks it didn't work out with him and Bron and AD. Yeah, I mean, look, in all seriousness, like I'm not a pro Russ guy. I think you guys know that, who've been listening to me for a while. But like, of course, he is a future first ballot Hall of Famer. He is a former MVP. Going to get his jersey retired in OKC, and it has been sad to see the way that his career has trended. I do think on some level he has a level of accountability of not being as adaptable as he probably should have been, but I also think he did show a level of adaptability with the Clippers and with the Nuggets that I think he was a little bit reluctant to embrace as a Laker. So I think he is NBA roster worthy. I think he has to buy into a smaller role. And at this point, he's probably more of a bench player, 7th, 8th man. And I don't know if he's willing to accept that. But yeah, I mean, it is, on a real note, it is sad to see the way that his career has trended. Smokey, yeah, I'm not saying LaRavia is as good or bad as Luke Walton, though Luke Walton did make my top 25 list of your top 25 list for those who voted, and then I made some changes. But by the way, I'm still reeling from how bad my team was. I completely misread the center run, and I should have drafted Andrew Bynum, and my team, I would have won, I think, with Luka and Bynum as my two pillars. It would have been a much better team, but I digress here. Yeah, I think LaRavia is better than Luke Walton. I think he's notably better than Luke Walton. I just meant like Luke. I was using Luke as an example of like on the 0304 team or even the Kobe Powell teams. He was that like connecting piece offensively where really good at entry passes, really good at swing passes, a solid shooter some of those years. Like I was trying to use a Lakers role player example of the type of role Laravia could have, but comparing roles to how good someone is, I think Laravia is a much better defender than Walton. Walton's a better passer. I think Walton is a much better passer, but I think Laravia is a better shooter and defender, and those are two things the Lakers really need. So maybe it's not the best comparison, but more so if you remember the way that Luke functioned offensively, it was a lot of some secondary ball handling, a lot of connecting the pieces offensively, entry passes to Powell and Bynum, swing passes to corner and wing shooters, and then decent defender, especially in like bench lineups, not like a lockdown guy and against like starting level guys. So I think Laravia is better defensively, but that was a sort of a general role that I was trying to compare to. Kevin, Gay plus First plus Hayes / DK for Grimes plus Drummond. I don't think I would give up a first for Grimes because I do think there's a bit like I think this sort of becomes like, then are you picking between Grimes and Austin? Because I don't think in Austin Grimes Luka pairing works. And if Grimes is a rental or you're just going to let Austin walk, I think at that point you got to probably flip Austin. And then I also think you got to be careful with just like giving up a first round pick for a potential rental. But like, I think it's probably fair-ish value. I think that's a fair trade construction. Like Grimes is like a especially with it being like Gabe as the piece, Gabe plus a first is probably fair value for a Grimes because you're not getting much out of this for Philly. Like, I don't know how much Gabe would even play for them, but I'm a little hesitant to use the first on. I would like to aim a little bit higher if I'm the Lakers with the first. Like, I do like Grimes. I like him more if Austin's not on the team, and then that's a whole other conversation here. Austin, Grimes, Luka. Offensively, I like the fit. Defensively, I have some real questions. Tally, what up, gang? Chris said players are going to come after Jovan now. Can't say anything negative about Russ. I mean, he's come after me before, so nothing new there. Bob, if the Lakers re-sign Reeves next season, his contract doesn't go toward the cap because of bird rights, correct? What if they then trade Reeves for another player? Does the new guy go over the cap? This is probably a question for someone who understands the cap better than I do, to be completely honest. I'm trying to... So yes, because of bird rights, you can go over the cap to keep Austin. So you can just keep his cap hold there, and his cap hold is going to be lower than his next season salary. So you can, in terms of order of business, you could keep Austin on his cap hold, do whatever other things you're trying to do in terms of trades or signing guys, and then continue to go over with Austin because of the bird rights. So that part is correct. In terms of trading Austin for another player, I think that this is where I'm forgetting the name of the rule right now, but I believe his outgoing salary, it gets a little complicated because his outgoing salary would be the cap hold. His incoming salary would be the new number. So I think it's actually more of it's tough for the team they're trading with to match it, because you have to be able to send out salary and take back more salary in the form of Austin. Like, it's not going to be equal. And so that team has to have some measure of flexibility or cap space potentially with whoever they're trading him for. So that's a bit of a complication. I don't want to go too much into that, but that is so it is possible. It is a bit complicated. Mishra asks, what is the Luka update? Quickly, he was a full participant in practice today. He is going to play in at least, or I don't want to say at least because it sounds like it's just going to be 2. So 2 of the final 4 preseason games. He is TBD for tomorrow, so we don't yet know. I think he's likely going to play tomorrow, or I would peg it as of right now as more likely than not he plays tomorrow, then plays in one of the 2 back-to-backs next week, Tuesday, Wednesday. I would suspect Wednesday in Vegas. And he clarified that he's not dealing with an injury. It's just been rest and workload coming out of Eurobasket. That's why he's been a modified participant all week. Robert Williams, I do not understand how you can even have an opinion on Laravia. Well, I did a film breakdown on Laravia, and I watched a bunch of film. I watched basically every offensive and defensive possession on him last season, so that's why I have an opinion on Laravia. I think I'm trying not to factor in the first couple preseason games too much into it. Like, I think we have seen some of the limitations with the foot speed defensively, but I think there's more versatility last year on film, but granted, it's been 2 preseason games, so I don't want to overreact to that. But I watched a bunch of film on him, and I've poured over his numbers, so that's why I've talked to people. So I think that's kind of how I try to form my opinions. Is I do a level of research with the film and the numbers, and then I talk to people about it. So that to me kind of informs my opinions, or that's how I try to come at things. So that's my, but like I get in general, I don't know if you're talking about me or just fans in general, because I know some people have been down on Laravia after the first couple games. Like, I think it's early. We got to give him some time. Kane Carter, hey Jovan, what are some players who are loved that you aren't the biggest fans of? You're trying to get me in trouble here. I would say, in general, the player archetype I am the least into in terms of like my basketball sensibilities is offensive-minded stars who never really won anything, and in terms of like deep playoff success, like maybe they made a second round, maybe they made a conference finals, maybe they even made a finals, but like didn't win championships, didn't have sustained deep playoff runs, like, you know, maybe it was a 1-off or a 2-off, and then that player but that player was kind of overrated a little bit and like put in this rarefied air when it was like, sure, his numbers are great, but it's not translating to winning or actual like playoff success. And then that player also struggles to adapt later in their career to like a smaller role. Like, I give a lot of credit to guys like a Paul Pierce or a Vince Carter, who I think both of those guys, even Dirk, Tim Duncan, Kobe was still playing at such a high level that I don't even put him in this class, because obviously he had the Achilles situation, but like Kobe was different because I think he was still elite and forced into a different role because of injury. But like those guys all, I thought, aged relatively gracefully in terms of, and to be clear, those guys, I'm not even talking about like that archetype. I'm just saying in general, those were stars who like embraced a lesser role. Like Paul Pierce became a stretch forward, and he didn't have much athleticism to begin with, like relatively to NBA players, but like he became more of a defensive, he was more of a stretch forward who was just like a pick and pop guy, a floor spacer. Vince Carter became a very valuable role player in Dallas and Memphis and Atlanta. And then, Tim Duncan and Dirk aged gracefully and took on smaller roles with their respective teams. So like those are the types of guys that I like in like a star level. So I'm not going to get into any names just because I don't want people on my back about it, but I think you can probably piece together some of the names based on what I just said. Jay Sparez, thank you for the super chat. Important aside, lock in New York City meetup date /time, brother. Let's get some East Coast love. Appreciate the new content this season. Yes, let's do it. I will be in New York. They play the Knicks and the Nets. So I'm going to make that like probably a 5 or 6 day trip. So would love to meet up with the Lakers fans in New York and meet the late night gang. You guys have named some of them. I don't agree with everybody that you're naming, but you guys are pretty close. Angelo, thank you for the super chat. Jovan, any thoughts on how Koloko's looking these days? Do you think he could develop into a rotation player past Jackson? I thought he's looked pretty good in the preseason. I'm a big Koloko guy. You guys know, like last year, there was a bit of an internal, like within the fan base, kind of competition or debate about Jemison versus Koloko. I was always on the Koloko side. I think I was on the right side of history here with Koloko versus Jemison. And I do think Koloko has backup potential. I would like to see him actually get the backup reps, and maybe Kleber being out gives him that opportunity early in the season. But I think like the tough thing, and this is honestly like in some ways it sort of reflects like the job market at times, right? Where when you're coming out of school, and I compare this with like young players, like when you're coming out of school, it's like it's hard to get that internship, it's hard to get that entry level job, and it's almost like they want a certain level, like a certain baseline of experience, but it's hard for you to get that experience without actually getting the opportunity, right? And that's a big thing for post grads, is like finding that first opportunity, getting that foot in the door to allow you to grow and make mistakes and learn what it's like to work for someone and then start your career. I think it's similar with young NBA players, where especially guys like Koloko, who are coming at it from a different path. He obviously has had some health concerns, and he's coming at it from like the G League two-way path. It's like Koloko, and it's always like those types of players are also lesser priorities for development, because like you're going to try to develop your Dalton Connect, your first round pick. You invested, you drafted, you gave them a guaranteed contract. You want to try to give that guy as many at-bats. But a guy like Koloko, it's like, I think Koloko can develop into a rotation guy. I just think he needs the reps and the opportunity. And there's no guarantee he gets that, because the Lakers are trying to compete. And he's not in a rebuilding situation where it's like, go out there, play 20, 25 minutes a night and mess up and learn and get better and improve. Like the Lakers, it's like, go out there for 8 minutes, don't fuck up, and excuse my French, and like hold your own. And if he can't do that, then he's probably not going to get the reps, right? So that's a tough spot for guys in Koloko's position, where I think he does have that upside, he does have that potential, but you really have to earn it kind of in practice, in training camp, in the G League, and then see if you can get that rep, get that opportunity with the parent team. But it's tough. There's no guarantees. G, what is your Adou Thiero comp? I'm trying to think of recent Lakers to compare him to. I guess could he be a better Stanley Johnson? Is that a good one? Is that fair? Rob compared him to OG Anunoby on draft night. I think that's obviously a 90th plus percentile outcome for Adou. The big thing with Adou right now, aside from the health, is the jumper, and he just has not shown an ability to hit even long twos, let alone threes consistently. But I think where Adou, there's a lot of upside, and I actually like him, and even if we're comparing him to like a Vando, is his finishing. I think he has really high finishing potential. So he's just such a freak athlete that he could dunk on people. He can get to the rim and finish with different hands, different arrays of finishes. He's got a really effective floater game. So I think the difference with Adou, when we talk about like Vando versus Adou, and of course Adou has got a ways to go in terms of being that level of defender consistently, but if he can hit defensively, what I like about him in comparison with a Vando is that I think his finishing ability is higher. So if you can figure out the right spots to put him on the floor, the right timing with cuts and just relocating and moving, he can be a guy who can catch a pass in the dunker spot and go finish at the basket. He can be a guy who could get an offensive rebound and put the ball back in and score. He is a guy who can maybe even run some pick and roll as a big man screener and get the ball in the short roll, couple dribbles, get to the rim, dunk, foul, finish, or hit a floater. So I do think there's a little bit more upside from the offensive perspective with him to like a Vando, though like he projects as a similar type of player of like a really good defender who has some offensive limitations. But I actually think the finishing within like 8 to 10 feet is better with Adou compared to a Vando. And that's a key thing that could keep him on the floor despite not being a good shooter. So I say I see some Stanley Johnson with the body type of like he's bigger than Stanley and he's more athletic than Stanley. So I could see the someone had made over the summer like a Gerald Wallace comp. I thought that was interesting. Like I could see that for those who remember Gerald Wallace. Like again, that's I think a pretty high him like hitting his upside, but I'm really intrigued by Adou, especially if he can get healthy here at some point in the next month. Who did Robert Williams is saying you compared him to Walton, dude. I compared Adou. I did not compare Adou to Walton. I compared Jake LaRavia to Walton. Roberto says 68% at the Raymond College. Yeah, that's really good. Anything above, for a wing especially, anything in like the high 50s, low 60s is pretty solid. Like league average is typically around, I think league average is like mid 50s ish. So mid to high, depending on the position. Bigs are obviously closer to around like 60. So 68 is really good. Omara says we need him to train with lethal shooter. Yeah, they definitely need to train the jumper. Lakers Visual says, I like the athletic Stanley Johnson comparison. What I like about the Stanley Johnson, like Stanley has a unique build and there's like a level of, remember like Stanley was good in small ball looks as like a 4 or even a 5 sometimes, like more of a 5 defensively. I think Adou, I've referenced him as like a potential backup 5 option in smaller lineups. I think he has that potential. And with the combination of, he's bigger than Stanley. Stanley was about 6'5", maybe 6'6". Adou's about 6'7", 6'8", more athletic, longer, maybe not as strong and like sturdy as Stanley, but I do think he's got some strength and like he's not like a twig or skinny by any means. That player type I think can be an important piece, and like I can see the OG Anunoby defensively as a upside for him. I think OG improved a lot as a scorer, shot creator, shooter throughout, like from where he started to where he is now. And of course, he's much older and more developed than Adou. So he's got time. Yeah. Chris, can Adou be our Amen? I do think the Thompsons are just like LeBron said they're like aliens. And when LeBron is saying that as an alien himself, that's like as high of praise as it gets. Amen and Asar, are very, very athletic. Like that is, we'll see that's a high bar. There's a reason why both those guys were top 10 picks, top 5 picks, top 6 picks, whatever. That's going to be that's, I think that's wishful thinking probably. But I mean, Amen Thompson, like right now is probably similar to an OG. Like you can maybe argue like the current version of OG is more of a win now player, but I think Amen's ceiling is certainly higher. So maybe, but I think he's got a ways to go offensively and even defensively. Like we've yet to see Adou play a preseason game or a summer league game. So like we got to see what he looks like against the NBA competition. But so far he has sounded. I like this one here from Rauzik. I thought of DJJ from the description. Yes, I think Derek Jones Jr. is actually a realistic player archetype for him to grow into. And DJJ is starting level, high level bench player on like some pretty good teams. So that's a win if he, yeah. Angelo says, yo, Jovan, the other mic makes you sound more crispy on my phone. Good feedback. Good to know. Continue to test out different mics, but I will listen back and I think it can also make my voice sound a little too raspy sometimes when I'm talking for a while. My voice, I need to work on my championship shape with my voice stamina. So sometimes I feel like it could be a little too raspy compared to that one. And but good to know. Denny third, tap into your sources. One is Iceman dropping. Hey, I need to get into that. Connor Phillips, more importantly, DJJ thrived alongside Luka. Yeah, that's a really good point. King Carter, would you move Vando for a Okoro, a slight upgrade that I feel would be worth it? I'll say this. I don't think Vando would be currently movable for a Okoro. I still think there's some skepticism with Vando's contract, but I think this version of Vando that we see, like I want to see more of it to have a proper response or perspective, because I think the current version of Vando is honestly probably better than Okoro. I get obviously Okoro is a better shooter and might be able to scale into a lineup as like more of a two-way threat, but that's yeah, I would consider it, but I think for now I would probably hold on to Vando. Matthew Wilson, do you think we could trade for Max Christie, PJ, or Najee Marshall? It's going to be tough, I think, to trade with Dallas. I just think the stain of the Luka trade is still. I mean, you guys see they're doing a play about the Luka trade. Like it is one of the trades. Like forget. Obviously, we know it's one of the craziest trades in NBA history, one of the craziest trades in sports history. But it's like really one of those things that I feel like it cut across like pop culture in a way, just like the zeitgeist. It entered this different level of. It's taken on. It's like its own life, and it's at a different level that I can't think of the last trade, at least in the NBA, that of course there's been big moves like the decision with LeBron in 2010 and KD with the Warriors in 2016 and LeBron with the Lakers again in 2018 and AD and Kawhi, and there's been some big moves over the last 15 years, but the Luka trade just feels like it hit this nerve where it just went to a different level. But I say all this to say, if you could get any of these three guys, I would sign up for it. Especially, like, you guys know how I feel about Max. PJ, if it's like a Rui for PJ thing, I would rather have PJ. Najee, I thought showed a level of playmaking and ball handling last year that I was surprised by and impressed by. And he's another two-way-ish guy. So, yeah, I mean, I would sign up for any of those three. DV2U, it's play called a modern Greek tragedy. Yeah, I mean, it's it's crazy. It's crazy. But I'm going to wrap here. I appreciate you guys for rocking with me for as long as you did, over an hour and a half here for those watching on YouTube. I'll be back tomorrow post-game. We got our first Crypto.com arena game of the season, so we'll be a little bit later, but we'll do my best to get out of there as quickly as I can. We'll be posting my 3 takeaways on YouTube Shorts and TikTok and Instagram and X, wherever you guys follow me. If you do follow me, I recommend checking that out to get your hit right before I go live. And then I will be coming back, going live, and we will be back to regularly scheduled program with the late night gang. But appreciate you all. Thank you so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Miss Optimist with a quick super chat here. Thank you. Hi, Jovan. Did JJ say that LeBron was every day on the court, or was it about someone else? That was about LeBron. He said he's been on the court every day, but he's been a modified participant. So he's not done any live action, any scrimmaging, but he has been on the court getting reps in terms of individual stuff. So I would assume that's shooting, maybe a little bit of driving, but I think they're trying to be careful with that. But appreciate you guys. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. I'll talk to you all tomorrow.